Hello everyone. We are going to discuss regarding the anti-epileptic drugs in this session. So the learning objectives for this class are classification of anti-epileptic drugs, pharmacology of important anti-epileptic drugs in detail. Then towards the end, we'll discuss about general principles of anti-epileptic use with emphasis on the management of status epilepticus. Now, the epilepsy is also called as disease of lightning, and it was described by J.H. Jackson. The famous personalities who have been affected by epilepsy are Alexander the Great, Julius Caesar, Napoleon, Lewis Carroll, who is the author of Alice in Wonderland, and the famous cricketer John D. Rhodes. Epilepsy is defined as a group of CNS disorders characterized by paroxysmal cerebral dysrhythmia, which is characterized by either a brief episodes of loss of consciousness, which is referred to as seizures, with or without body movements, which are referred to as convulsions or sensory phenomena. But these are the three the components of the epilepsy. Either there'll be seizure, which is a loss of consciousness, or there'll be body movements, which are called as convulsions, or there'll be sensory phenomena. This can occur either singly or in combination. The etiology of epilepsy, most of the cases are primary idiopathic. That is the cause is not known. And some of the cases can be secondary to trauma, cranial surgery, intracranial tumor, infections like tuberculoma, cysticercosis, cerebral ischemia. Whatever be the cause, the treatment of epilepsy remains the same. Now, the types of epilepsy we can mainly classify into generalized seizures and partial seizures. Under generalized seizures, we are having generalized tonic-clonic seizures, which is shortened as GTCS or otherwise called as major epilepsy or grand mal epilepsy. Then we have absent seizures, which are otherwise called as petit mal seizures. Then myoclonic seizures and atonic seizures or akinetic epilepsy. These are the examples of generalized seizures. Then partial seizures are simple partial seizures, SPS or cortical focal epilepsy, complex partial seizures or CPS or temporal lobe epilepsy or psychomotor epilepsy, simple partial or complex partial seizures, secondarily generalized. So you have to also learn the alternative names of these seizures. Now we'll just have a description of each of the seizures that you can understand them better. The generalized tonic-clonic seizure is the commonest type of generalized seizure, and it usually lasts for 1 to 2 minutes. The sequence that occurs in the patient is that there is an aura. That means the patient can feel that something is going to happen to him. There is a cry, then there is loss of consciousness, then there is a tonic contraction of all the body muscles, which is followed by clonic jerking. And then the person falls into prolonged sleep and there is depression of CNS functions. This is the examples of the tonic phase and the clonic phase. Then we are having absent seizures, and this is a seizure which occurs mainly in children. And here there is a momentary loss of consciousness. It is very short duration, and at times it is not even detected by the parents or the teachers because the loss of consciousness is momentary, where the patient appears like he's staring at one direction. It may not even be detected as a epilepsy. There is no muscular component. That is, there is no tonic contractions or the clonic jerking in the seizure. And the characteristic diagnostic feature of this absent seizure is the presence of 3 cycles per second of spike and wave pattern in the EEG. So EEG is a diagnostic modality of epilepsy, and in this EEG, you will characteristically see spike and wave pattern in absent seizure. Then there is myoclonic seizure. There is a shock-like momentary contractions of a muscles of a limb or the whole body. So it's affecting only a few muscles, or sometimes it can affect the whole body. Then atonic seizures, it is the person becomes unconsciousness and the muscles are all relaxed. In the previous seizures, you have seen that there is a muscle that undergoes the contraction phase, but here the muscles are so relaxed that the patient just falls off. That is, it's called as an atonic seizure. Then there are simple partial seizures and complex partial seizures. In simple partial seizures, there is contractions of a group of muscles, or there is a localized sensory disturbance which lasts for 1 to 2 minutes. There is no loss of consciousness in simple partial seizures. Similarly, in complex partial seizures, there is some kind of attacks of confused behavioral, purposeless movements and there is emotional changes lasting 1 to 2 minutes. There is loss of consciousness, and the seizure focus of this type of seizures is identified mainly in the temporal lobe. Now, you only have to be a little oriented about the type of seizures because we are not going into the depth of the seizures because the seizure management and the seizure um, details are supposed to be learned from the Department of Medicine and higher up in the neurology departments, which is beyond the confines of the second MBBS or second BDS UG curriculum. So, but you have to be aware of the seizures and the important features of that. Now, let us define what is status epilepticus. Okay, it is very important. It's a medical emergency, and you also have to learn the management of status epilepticus because it is a casualty management, and undergraduate students should be well versed with all kinds of casualty management. So this is a continuous seizure activity which is occurring for more than 30 minutes, or if two or more seizures occur without a recovery of consciousness in between. So all the seizures that I defined earlier lasted only 1 to 2 minutes, but this is something that is happening continuously for 30 minutes, or there are two or more seizures which are occurring continuously without a recovery period in between. So what happens in this type of a situation is that the brain is devoid of the oxygen for a long time, and that can lead to brain damage. So this is requiring an emergency management to prevent brain damage. Now, febrile convulsions are also a type of seizures which occur in children below 5 years of age. And this type of seizure occurs only when the child is running high temperature. This is mainly because the children, they are not able to, their hypothalamus is not well formed and well functioning, so it's not able to control the temperatures well, and therefore the body goes into a seizure. And this kind of seizure occurs usually during the fever, when the child is running a high fever, and it doesn't progress to epilepsy. Some children can progress to epilepsy in adulthood, but most of the children do not progress to epilepsy, and this occurs only under the age of 5 years. Now let us look at the classification of anti-epileptic drugs. Under the barbiturates, we have got phenobarbital, then deoxybarbiturate, example primidone, hydantoin, mainly the example is phenytoin, immunostilbin, example carbamazepine, succinimide, example ethosuximide, aliphatic carboxylic acid, valproic acid, benzodiazepines, we have already learned, the examples are diazepam, clonazepam, etc. Phenyltrazine, lamotrigine, cyclic GABA analogs, gabapentin, and pregabalin. And there are newer drugs like topiramate, zonisamide, etc. So this classification of anti-epileptic drugs is quite vast, and you have to learn them with examples very appropriately so that you can present the same in the exams. Now, before we go into each of the classes, I think we should remember, it is better to discuss about the mechanism of action of anti-epileptic drugs. Now, the most common mechanisms by which the anti-epileptic drugs act are either they prolong the inactivated state of sodium channels, or they may be inhibiting the T-type calcium current in the thalamic neurons, or they can increase the GABA activity in the neuron, in the brain. Remember, GABA is an inhibitory CNS neurotransmitter. So if we are increasing the GABA activity, so we are trying to cause the increase the inhibitory neurotransmission in the brain. You already know seizure is an hyperexcitatory state, and we don't want to have that state. So we are increasing the GABA activity in the brain, or reverse way we can inhibit the excitatory glutamatergic transmission. So all the anti-epileptic drugs will be acting by one or more of these mechanisms. The same thing I have shown in the figure here. This is a figure that is taken from the Essentials of Medical Pharmacology from K.B. Tripathi. You can see that whenever you are writing the mechanism of action of anti-epileptics, please make sure that you draw these diagrams also alongside the mechanism of action. So this is a prolongation of sodium channels. This is the inhibition of T-type calcium current. This is the facilitation of the inhibitory GABA transmission, and it is the inhibition of excitatory glutamatergic transmission. So these are the four mechanisms by which the anti-epileptic drugs act. You have to be very well versed with these mechanisms. Now, we'll discuss about the phenobarbital, which was the first anti-epileptic drug introduced, and it is acting via increasing the inhibitory GABA transmission. We have already learned about barbiturates under the topic of sedative hypnotics, and you know in detail how the GABA is opening the chloride channel. And this is the same way here it is acting in as an anti-epileptic drug also. So I'm not discussing the detailed mechanism because it has already been covered under sedative hypnotics. Now, this has got a slow oral absorption, but it acts for a long time. The T half is 80 to 120 hours. Now, the main problem with the phenobarbital is that it causes sedation and it can cause behavioral abnormalities, diminished intelligence, learning and memory problems, hyperactivity in children. And if it is given to older people with epilepsy, it can cause mental confusion. On long-term use, it can also cause megaloblastic anemia, osteomalacia, and rashes. Now, remember that all the anti-epileptic drugs, they have to be used for prolonged duration. It is not 1 or 2 days or weeks or months. It has to be used for years for the epilepsy to be controlled. So eventually, if you're using phenobarbital in a child, the child will grow up with diminished intelligence, learning and memory problems, and and megaloblastic anemia, osteomalacia, etc. This is the reason why its use has become very less popular. We have better drugs now, and we are resorting to that. But when it was used, it is mainly used for generalized tonic-clonic seizures, simple partial seizures, complex partial seizures, and it is also a management strategy in status epilepticus. Please remember the uses. The dose orally, it is given 60 milligrams 1 to 3 times a day as per the need of the individual. Now, primidone is a deoxybarbiturate and is converted in the liver to phenobarbital and phenylethyl malonamide, PEMA. These metabolites are the ones which are responsible for the anti-epileptic activity of this drug. The adverse effects are similar to phenobarbital, and it is also causing a lot of blood-related ADRs like anemia, leukopenia. It can also cause psychotic reaction and lymph node enlargement, and this drug is not popular at all now because of the adverse reactions. Now we discuss about the most common and the most popular anti-epileptic drug, that is the phenytoin. Now, when you look at the mechanism of action of the phenytoin, it says that it prevents the repetitive detonation of normal brain cells during depolarization shift. Now, let us understand what this means. The sentence looks a little complicated, but it is not so. Okay, now what it means is that detonation means can think that bombing of the normal cells. You know that that when epilepsy or the seizure is occurring, there is an excitatory state of the brain cells. That means it is like bombing the brain cells. Now you know that how then a normal action potential occurs, that whenever sodium is entering, there is a depolarization shift. Now imagine a situation where there is it's a large depolarization, and it is overlapping the previous depolarization. It's like a wave. Okay, like there is a big wave coming, and it is coming before the previous wave gets over. So this is what is happening in a depolarization shift. There is a large depolarization that it is superimposing on the previous depolarization. So what happens is that it is like bombing the brain cells. Now, how can we like prevent this? We can prevent this because we know that the reason why it is occurring is attributed to the sodium channels. So what we can do is that we can make the phenytoin bind to the voltage dependent sodium channels, and the phenytoin, just like the local anesthetic lignocaine, will prolong the sodium channels in the inactivated state. Therefore, no further sodiums will be, no ions will be going into the neurons, and there will be the neuron will be stabilized. It will not be depolarizing further. And this will inhibit the high frequency firing of the neurons. The key point here is that it is prolonging the inactivated state of sodium channels. That is the principal mechanism of action of phenytoin. Now, the importance of pharmacokinetics of phenytoin is also to be noted, because there are very important aspects that are there in phenytoin which you have not seen in the previous chapters. Okay, so here you can see it is having a slow oral absorption. One important thing is that the bioavailability of different market preparations of phenytoin will be different. So that which means that if a patient is stabilized on one particular brand, the doctor should prescribe him the same brand. Otherwise, with the brand changes, there is a high possibility that the bioavailability can change and the person can go into either toxicity or the decreased therapeutic effect. It is highly bound to plasma proteins. It is metabolized in liver and exuded in urine. And it also follows a mixed order of elimination kinetics. That is, initially at lower doses, it follows the first order kinetics. That is, the elimination is directly proportional to the concentration of the drug. And at higher doses, it shifts to the zero order kinetics. So what happens is that a slight change in the dose can change the concentration of the drug, and the drug can reach the toxic levels. This is because it is following a mixed order kinetics of elimination. Again, this is a top concept that you have already learned general pharmacology, and by this time you should be able to interpret all these things as and when we are discussing this in the drugs. T half is 12 to 24 hours and it needs therapeutic drug monitoring. Because of these fluctuations in the concentration, because of the changes in the bioavailability and mixed order kinetics of elimination, the patients who are on phenytoin usually are advised therapeutic drug monitoring to make sure that the plasma concentration of the drug is in the therapeutic range and is not below the therapeutic effect range or in the toxic range. The adverse drug reactions of phenytoin are also very important. Whenever it is asked in the exam, please make sure that you are going to write the ADRs elaborately in the way that I'm going to discuss now. So there are two types of ADRs. One is at therapeutic levels. That means when the patient is receiving the normal doses for a prolonged period, he might end up having hypertrophy of gums, hirsutism, hypersensitivity reactions, hyperglycemia, megaloblastic anemia, osteomalacia, and if it is given in a pregnant woman, that can end up in teratogenicity, that is fetal hydantoin syndrome. Okay, now this can be remembered with the acronym HOM. So you have so many H's there, and then there is osteomalacia, just like phenobarbital, and there is megaloblastic anemia, just like you saw in phenobarbital. These are the chronic effects. Now the other effects which are occurring at high plasma levels means if suppose a patient is having a high plasma concentration, either because the brand has been changed or he has consumed more amount of drug, or there is some drug interaction because of which the plasma level of this particular drug has gone high, then what happens is that he can develop toxic symptoms, that is CNS effects characterized by ataxia, vertigo, headache, diplopia, nystagmus, behavioral problems, drowsiness, mental confusion. GIT effects like epigastric pain, nausea, vomiting, CVS effects like hypotension, arrhythmias, and when it is given by IV injection, phenytoin can cause local vascular injury. So whenever phenytoin is asked, please make sure that you write it in this format only. I don't want to see people just writing nausea, vomiting for everything and anything. This is the way you have to present the ADRs of phenytoin. Now, there are a lot of drug interactions with phenytoin, and it is not when phenytoin is given with other anti-epileptics like carbamazepine and others, which are going to learn. There is a lot of ADRs. Okay, they themselves induce metabolism of each other, and for example, phenytoin can induce the metabolism of carbamazepine. Phenytoin's own metabolism is induced by carbamazepine. So it is a very complex interaction. We cannot really predict what is going to happen or how the levels will be affected if all these antileptics are given together, because they interact this side also and reverse way also. Okay, now the uses of phenytoin are mainly in GTCS, SPS, CPS, status epilepticus, just like phenobarbital, and a non-epileptic use is in trigeminal neuralgia. So a drug that can be useful in trigeminal neuralgia is phenytoin. Now, let us see fosphenytoin. It is a water-soluble prodrug of phenytoin, and it is rapidly converted to phenytoin in the body. Okay, now this was introduced to overcome the difficulties of with IV administration of phenytoin. I already told you that when phenytoin is given by the IV route, it can cause damage to the vascular structures, and that is why we have they have introduced the forced phenytoin. Now, it doesn't cause much damage to intima on IV injection. It can be injected at a faster rate, and it can be injected in both saline and glucose. Whereas a phenytoin cannot be injected in a drip of glucose solution because it gets precipitated in the glucose solution. So you can only inject phenytoin in saline solution. But on the other hand, the forced phenytoin can be injected with both glucose and saline. Now let us look at the next drug, that is carbamazepine. It is a first-line anti-epileptic drug. It prolongs the inactivated state of sodium channels just like phenytoin, and also it potentiates the GABA receptor. Other than the anti-epileptic action, it also has lithium-like action in mania and bipolar disorder. You are yet to learn lithium, so whenever you are learning lithium for mania and bipolar disorder, you will also come across carbamazepine. It also has got an antidiuretic action like ADH. So please remember the additional actions of carbamazepine. Now, under the pharmacokinetics, what you have to remember is that it is an inducer of microsomal enzyme inducer, and the characteristic feature is that it can induce its own metabolism. That is called as autoinduction. So what happens is that the T half initially when you start the drug will be around 20 to 40 hours, but it becomes less because of autoinduction by this drug itself. Okay, so you have to increase the dose of carbamazepine after a few days because of this problem. That is, it induces its own metabolism. The main adverse effects associated with carbamazepine are neurotoxicity, which is characterized by dizziness, vertigo, diplopia, and ataxia. There is vomiting and diarrhea. Hypersensitivity reactions can occur in some individuals, and there can be water retention and hyponatremia because of ADH-like actions. So these are very specific areas, and you have to remember them the way I have mentioned here. It is also teratogenic. So we have not come across any drug that is safe in pregnancy so far. Now, the uses are mainly GTCS, CPS, SPS, and again in trigeminal neuralgias, and it's also used in manic depressive illness and acute mania. Just like phenytoin, it also has got complex interactions. That is, it is inducing the metabolism of several drugs. It also its own metabolism gets inhibited by other drugs, and it can induce its own metabolism also. So it's again a complex interaction of these drugs. Now, the new congener of carbamazepine is oxcarbazepine, and when you compare with carbamazepine, it is rapidly converted to active metabolite that is not oxidized to epoxide. The toxic effects of this particular drug is less as compared to carbamazepine. Now, the drug interactions and autoinduction of metabolism also is comparatively less. It is less hepatotoxic, but however, it causes more hyponatremia. And the indications are kind of same as for carbamazepine. But this drug is better tolerated than carbamazepine. So most of the neurologists have shifted to this drug instead of carbamazepine because of its better side effect profile. Now let us look at the next one, that is ethosuximide. That is, it's a succinimide, and it is mainly acting by inhibiting the T-type calcium currents in the thalamic neurons. And these are actually low threshold calcium currents that act as the pacemaker and amplifies the repetitive spikes in the brain. So again, if you want to prevent the excitatory action, we have to prevent this T-type calcium currents. There is nothing much significant in the pharmacokinetics of ethosuximide. What you have to remember here is that mainly the use, because it is the main drug that is used in absence seizures and myoclonic seizures. So far, we have only seen drugs which are useful in GTCS, CPS, and SPS. We have not seen any drug which is useful for absence seizures and myoclonic seizures. But this is a drug, ethosuximide, which is useful for absence seizures and myoclonic seizures. The adverse drug reactions, again, you don't have very significant areas, but GI intolerance, tiredness, mood changes, hypersensitivity reactions are some of the areas which are seen with ethosuximide. Then you have got sodium valproate, which is again a very important drug. It is an aliphatic carboxylic acid derivative. It is a broad spectrum anti-epileptic drug. Please note this point. It is a broad spectrum. That is, it is active against different types of epilepsies. And the mechanism of action, it is acting by multiple mechanisms. So whatever mechanisms initially I have mentioned to you, the sodium valproate is acting by all those mechanisms. That is, it is prolonging the inactivated state of sodium channels, just like phenytoin and carbamazepine. It is inhibiting the T-type calcium current, just like ethoxyximide. It is increasing the GABA activity in the brain, just like phenobarbital. And how it is increasing the GABA activity in the brain is by increasing the synthesis of GABA from glutamic acid, and also by inhibiting the degradation of GABA by GABA transaminase enzyme. So synthesis is increased and the destruction is displayed. This is how it is increasing the GABA activity. It is also blocking the excitatory glutamate receptors. So remember, sodium valproate is acting by all these mechanisms. So again, I have shown you the same picture which I have shown you earlier. Now, when you look at the pharmacokinetics, nothing much is significant here. The adverse drug reactions are very important. I have derived an acronym here: vomiting, anorexia, liver toxicity. And if it is given in children below 3 years, there is a chance of fulminant hepatitis. There is pancreatitis, there is rashes, thrombocytopenia and bleeding tendency, edema, alopecia, curling of hair, and teratogenicity. The characteristic teratogenicity seen with sodium valproate is spina bifida and other neural tube defects. So this is also an enzyme inhibitor. Though enzyme inhibition is not an ADR, I just mentioned it to complete the acronym. So please remember the adverse reactions. I don't want you to write the acronym in the exams, but please remember it. You can just use the acronym for remembering the adverse drug reaction. Again, a lot like the other anti-epileptic drugs, valproate also has multiple drug interactions, but it mainly acts as an enzyme inhibitor. It is mainly used in absence seizures. So you have got two drugs at this point which are used in absence seizures. One is the ethosuximide and the other one is sodium valproate. It is also useful in GTCS, SPS, CPS, and myoclonic seizures. And other non-epileptic uses are mania and bipolar disorder, and also used in migraine prophylaxis. So far you have got two drugs for absence seizures. It is ethosuximide and sodium valproate. You have got multiple drugs for GTCS, SPS, and CPS, that is phenytoin, phenobarbital, carbamazepine, and now the sodium valproate. And then for mania and bipolar disorder, we mentioned two drugs, that is carbamazepine and now sodium valproate. Since it is acting against a lot of different types of seizures, including absence seizure, that is why it is called as one of the broad spectrum anti-epileptics. Now, we have got the divalproates, which is a coordination compound of valproic acid and sodium valproate in 1:1 ratio. The oral absorption is slow, but the bioavailability is kind of same as sodium valproate. The GI tolerance is better, so you will have less of vomiting and nausea and all. That is why it may be a kind of preferred over sodium valproate because of its better tolerability profile. And it can also be used for mania, bipolar disorders and all. Now, the next part we will discuss in the next video. Thank you.